on to this next slide and take the Slido down, but I love kind of getting that feel. So we're going to switch a little bit to your experience from what you've felt and what you've faced. Now I really want to talk to you as leaders, and this is my sweet spot. I, for the last 20 plus years, have worked with leaders who understand two things. One, they understand that leadership starts with you. It's self-knowledge, it's self-awareness, it's being reflective, it's being honest with yourself, it's investing in yourself, it's in clarifying your values. Leadership development is not a nice luxury that organizations tack on to the benefits package. It's really an acknowledgement of we want you to strengthen who you are as a person, as a professional, as a leader. And that requires some rigor, that requires some commitment. And the second thing they understand is it's not all about you. A leader without followers, without a community, without people that they're serving is a person on a walk who's feeling maybe good about themselves, but isn't really mobilizing others. And so when I was at Gallup, I loved Gallup because I'm a qualitative researcher, but they have, the largest empirical database of studying organizations and leaders and what's happening and what makes the difference. What are the differentiators in organizations that thrive? And when they did a study on what people most need from leaders, and this was across all domains, it was in medical and corporate and nonprofit, they found 4 things. And I want you to think about maybe what's on your mind right now. It may be vision or strategy, direction, whatever those kind of leadership words are. This is what they found. Most important, people need to find solid ground. And this really applies when things are uncertain, when there's change, when things are rocky. They need to know what they can count on. In fact, when Gallup looks at the items that they measure in their engagement survey, the very first one is, I know what's expected of me at work. People can join a phenomenal mission and organization and great ideals and aspirations. And if they don't know what's expected of them when they show up, there's a sense of drift, there's a sense of confusion. So as you think about your own teams and you think about what you need from each other, what can you count on? What is still true? If you think about your personal narrative, what is still, this I know to be true? It could be your values, it could be the key people in your life, it could be mission. And just really affirm that, because when you have solid ground, when you're rooted, I want you to think of a big mighty oak tree. When you're rooted, ultimately those roots go and join an ecosystem of other roots. You have not just a grounded tree, but a grounded forest. And that's going to hold you together organizationally. The next one is they needed compassion. They needed true, in fact, some of the words that came up, because this was an open-ended, and then they did an analysis of all the words. The word love was there. And in so many professional environments, they kind of went back and checked that just to make sure. And it is a true heartfelt. It's different than just concern. It's different than interest. It's different than I'm here for you. It was a real lovingness. Marcus Buckingham, who was a colleague of mine at Gallup, who's just done wonderful work about building from our strengths and our talents. His latest book is called Love and Work. And it's about the people that are really thriving. They love what they do. It doesn't mean it's easy. In fact, the love leads them to do harder things. The love engages them when other things are dragging it down. Love, compassion gets us out of that transactional interactions at work and really creates an emotional bond. The next one is trust. This is one of those buzzwords in leadership where, of course, we need trust, assume trust. Ironically, in social science, it is a word that when you ask about trust, it increases distrust. Now, think about this. I come home from a business trip. I'm like, honey, do you trust me? Well, I did. Should I? It just kind of stirs the water. What exactly are we talking about now? Is this a trick question? Instead, people actually have, if you've heard about love languages, that's been a popular book for many years. Some people have different love languages. I personally like gifts and words of affection. Some people like quality time or physical touch. My husband's really into acts of service, which is a real bummer because I'm not really into that. But we have these love languages, and it's not just love as some broad concept that, of course, who's against love? It's finding the currency, the language that's meaningful to that person you're in relationship with. So then that means something to them. Trust is the same way. Your team members, each other, you have different trust currencies. For some of you, it is competence. If you don't know what you're talking about and have the credentials, it's hard for me to go a lot further. There needs to be a there. For some of you, it is care and concern. You care about me as a person. I know you're smart. I know you have the degrees. But there's a real genuine interpersonal resonance there. And so I trust you. For other people, it's advocacy and loyalty. When I'm out of the room, you're going to speak up for me. If you think about diversity and inclusion, you don't really have true belonging until you've learned others' trust currencies. Okay? You can invite people to the table. You can even offer them a voice. But until you diversify your trust currencies and what it means for people to feel like they belong, what it means for people to feel like they can show up with their true selves, be honest, ask tough questions, take risk, you will not get the full talent around the room. You know, diversity is a fact, inclusion is a strategic choice, but you will not get the benefits of belonging until you dig deeper and find out what makes people and helps people trust you as practitioners, as scientists, as an organization. And then finally, hope. This is an incredible concept because it's both cognitive and affective. It's affective in that it is a positive emotion. It's optimism. But it is not blind faith. It is cognitive in that there's a reason to believe. You didn't sign up and just say, trust me, in the most superficial way. You actually help people feel excited, work harder, engage, have tough conversations because you've painted a future about where we're going together. You've given them reasons to believe. You've shared stories where they know that the tough parts aren't being, shoved under the carpet. Does that make sense? I want to see a sister and brotherhood of the nodding heads. Okay, all right, that's so here. I'm a Southern girl, so I don't need an amen, but I appreciate. Does this kind of make sense? This is not I loved working at Gallup because there was always a there. These are things that I could say as a motivational speaker, but I promise you these are evidence-based. This is what's emerging from the fields of positive psychology, the fields of flourishing, and I'm seeing organizations transform in ways that create hopeful futures, that help people combine their head, heart, and hands. You have to have the head. It's got to make sense. There's a science. There's a benefit. There's a strategy. It cognitively is cohesive. There's hands. You make it happen. You execute with excellence. You operationally do the hard work. But then there's a heart. There's that ability to tell real stories, to connect, to have a broad emotional lexicon that allows you to have rich stories together. And I'm telling you that not because I just have anecdotes. I do have incredible, beautiful stories of the organizations I have the privilege to serve, but also just from the broader work that Gallup and many other organizations are doing. All right, so I want us to talk about now I addressed you kind of what's your personal story, loss, and gain. I've shared with you a little bit about, okay, now let's come together and have a leadership conversation. It starts with us, but it's not all about us. What do our people need from us? Stability, compassion, trust, hope. Now we're going to talk about what it takes for all of you to move into a future where you're conceptualizing, you're feeling, you're engaging in a way that really gets to the essence of what you're up against, what you're leaning into. So it's easy for us to think, and this certainly happened with crisis in the early days of the pandemic, and this happens with smart people. There's a classic article, Teaching Smart People How to Learn, by Chris Argyris, who's just kind of a giant in the field of transformational learning. And he's shown that really smart people have the hardest time wrapping their minds around adaptive problems because they're looking for the technical solution. The solution you can verify, test, scale, and execute. Adaptive solutions involve attitudes and behaviors and non-compliance that makes no sense. It's that irrational part of us. And so this is a little bit about how you can conceptualize your work together in ways that will lead to greater innovation based in both compassion and courage. So, myths of leaders during times of change. One is that they're thinking there is a chess set. They're thinking there's a problem to solve or a game to win. And it comes up in our metaphors. You know, we're going to charge the hill. We're going to, battle our demons. We're going to take down the giants. And when we do that, we're really thinking implicitly that there are some rules out there, and if we figure them out, we'll be able to win. That if we concentrate, that will let our intellect get really focused. And then finally, that there is some kind of closure. There's a win, lose, or at least a draw. There's some closure. What we know about change, turmoil, as well as human development is that it's much more like a surf, a wild tidal wave that we are trying to balance and trying to navigate. So instead of the chessboard where we're concentrating, we think there's rules, there's closure. Instead, we're trying to really find balance and agility. What's our point of contact with this wild world of change that we certainly don't control, we can't harness? So instead, let's focus on connection instead of concentration. Let's focus on finding clarity instead of thinking there's certainty. Let's kind of go back and forth between the horizon and the here and now, where we're going, where we are. That kind of metaphor, I'm not a surfer, but just can you feel that just even if in your body, if you were kind of embodying that kind of change? That's the nature of what we're dealing with. That's the nature, not just in COVID, not just in the current crisis. It is the nature of change. Can we stay connected? Can we be agile? And can we be both and, the horizon and my grounded reality? Being both and in an either or world is a challenge. So I'm going to do this very quickly. The achiever's dilemma is these are classic mindsets that the smartest, most successful, this originated in my doctoral study, but I've been verifying it for the last 20 years with my clients. The achiever's dilemma is that if I work harder, faster, longer, I can meet the challenge. Newsflash, this will wear you out, burn you out, make you cynical, and probably a martyr. These are the people that, oh, no one works harder than me, or oh, if only other people stayed as late, if only other people cared as much as I did. This is a really difficult career transformation for highly successful professionals where the first couple rungs of that achievement ladder were driven by drive, determination, stick-to-itness, follow-through. But becoming a leader to lead is not an individual contributor, achiever sport. Leading means letting go. It means stepping back so others can step up. You don't want to just achieve, you want to create. You're not just trying to accomplish, you're trying to stir up meaning, you're trying to mobilize. So if you can walk away from that achiever's dilemma, there is a much more creative terrain to explore. The next one is the caretaker's dilemma. We see this with medical professionals, clergy, even firefighters or different public servants, where if I can just hang in there, I can provide the care that's necessary. And unfortunately, the self-care, the understanding that the compassion can be there even when healing doesn't occur. The understanding that sometimes we try to fix it or fake it. You know, we think we can fix it because we're going to care enough, or we fake it by having a cheery attitude. We know that people in heartache, people that are struggling, need presence. They need space and grace. They need you to witness their experience as much as they need that actual caretaking. And then finally, I've mentioned this several times, the intellect dilemma. I love working with really smart people. I worked doing the Boeing leadership program for many, many years, where there was literally rocket scientists that I was working with, really helping them understand that being the best engineer, project manager, rocket scientist, that's not what leadership is about. It's almost a given. You've got the goods, you've achieved, you're smart. Now it's about something more expansive. And real leaders, the true understanding of leaders getting over this dilemma, is yes, it has to be the head, you have to be smart. Yes, it has to be the heart, you have to care. Yes, it has to be hands, you have to deliver. But leaders, especially collectively, know how to bring that together. They're creating an experience, not just executing a solution. They're bringing others along as they embody a vision that is emerging, not just whiteboarding and then, didn't you get the memo? We decided to change, right? Leaders really embody all of that. So as you think about your leadership journey and some of the exciting things that are ahead of you, I want you to think about a question that I ask many of the groups I work with is, are you a group or a team? And a group is a collection of individuals that have expertise, the lanes are clear, there's a reason that you have membership, there's an org chart, there's an association. But a team is something much more interconnected and interdependent. It requires still knowing your lane, knowing your expertise, knowing your decision rights, really shining in your spot. But you don't just show up, you lean in. You don't just have shared interest or even a shared strategy. You have a shared purpose. You have a shared identity. This is why being together is so important. You're together now because you're creating an identity of what you want to be moving forward. A shared identity means having a shared past. Maybe not all of you were present for every chapter, but the story of the past, at least the best parts of it, mean something to you. And now you're creating a story moving forward. Does this make sense as you see this? I'll kind of tap back into the moving heads. Okay, great. So here's a couple suggestions, and I want to make sure that we have some time for what I call question and response. It's not question and answer, which would assume that I have the answers and you get to ask a question. I'm going to dump some deep knowledge into you. That really sets me up for a scary situation. But question and response. So I'm going to save a little time here at the end where we can have more of a dialogue, which is what I've been asking all along. But first, I want you to think about this both on that individual level as well as collectively. When you're entering a new chapter, when you're entering terrain of possibility, when you're emerging from a challenge or turmoil that has upset you, created disruption, here's what you need to do. Rally your home team. These are not just your usual suspects, the people you live with or a best friend or a spouse. This is the friend you haven't talked to for years, but they saw you at your best. This is a counselor, a teacher, a coach who saw you at your worst or at a growing pain moment that would love to hear from you and maybe reminisce. It's having a great doctor or therapist or lawyer or retreat center or spiritual practice. It's that broader set of individuals or resources that when life gets difficult, you could rally. You need to think about who that home team is. And this doesn't mean like I have people on my home team, they don't even realize it until they get my lifeline call, you know. I have a couple truth tellers, you know, the girlfriend that says, not that lipstick or not those heels, you know. I have the wise sage who says, what do you really want to say? You know, what are you going to be brave enough to talk about? I have some magic makers like this production team that I have no idea what they're doing, but thank goodness they're here and give me this and help me not trip over something. You know, who are your magic makers? They allow your brilliance to shine because of the work that they do in the world. There's a whole list, and some of these are in the book, about the characters that you want to take, you want to recruit along in your hero's journey. It could be the devil's advocate. It could be the oracle. But I want you to think about more broadly. Most people have to put some thought into this. Again, it's not the usual suspects, but it's the people that you could rally that are on your side, they're on your team, and they want you to thrive. The next one is making your voice count. The leadership mentor of mine at Harvard was Ron Heifetz. He was actually a classically trained cellist as well as an MD. And he used music as the metaphor for helping us understand embodied leadership. And he would tell us that every note counts. He'd talk about cadence. and pausing and dissonance and harmony. You know, there's a musical line and melody and background happening in organizational life. That's an abstract metaphor in some ways, but it's also deeply resonant. You know, so if we take that moment, if we just stop, if we make what we say matter instead of the chatter that so often comes out just as a kind of habitual nervous response, it changes the way we listen and it changes the way we share. And this gets back also into some really core issues around diversity and inclusion and belonging. It's not just the voices we invite around the table, it's the voices we amplify. It's the voices we actively ask in. It's the dissenters where we say, tell us what's really bothering you. People wouldn't complain about anything if they didn't care about something. You know, sometimes the really crabby customer or patient or doctor is the one who is fighting for something really important and they're just trying to find the words. So listen for the voice, listen for the music behind the words, and don't forget the power of language. How are you doing today? Not just can we survive, but how can we survive? These small language changes really shift the intention of what we're sharing with one another, what we're listening to. And I can tell you, your voice counts when it comes to innovation, to talent, to leadership, to vision, to service, to care. The collective has a tipping point. And sometimes it's that last 10 or 15% that changes the complexion of what story you're taking forward.